The communication array on the mining station Kepler's Dream had been acting up for weeks. Chief Engineer Maya Rodriguez cursed under her breath as she crawled through the maintenance shaft, her magnetic boots clanking against the metal flooring. The array was supposed to receive routine supply schedules from Earth, not broadcast emergency signals across half the galaxy. Just a simple recalibration, she muttered, adjusting the primary transmission dish. What she didn't know was that her simple fix had just sent humanity's most classified military emergency code racing through space at faster-than-light speeds. The signal reached the Zephyrian Empire first. Admiral Thektar was reviewing battle plans for their upcoming conquest of the Terran colonial zone when his communications officer nearly fell from his station. "Admiral, we're receiving a code Omega transmission from the human territories." Thektar's four eyes widened in disbelief. Code Omega meant only one thing in the galactic military lexicon: total annihilation protocol. The humans were calling in every ship, every weapon, every last resource for an extinction-level threat. "Impossible," Thektar hissed through his mandibles. "Our intelligence indicates they have maybe 30 functioning warships in that entire sector. What could possibly warrant a code Omega?" The transmission continued broadcasting, its automated message repeating the same terrifying words: Code Omega. All units respond immediately. Threat level, galactic, coordinates attached. Humanity requires immediate assistance. Within hours, the signal had reached the Crystalline Confederacy, the Plasma Lords of Vega, and even the mysterious Shadow Fleet that operated from the galaxy's rim. Every major power began mobilizing their forces, driven by a mixture of curiosity, fear, and the universal understanding that when someone calls code Omega, you respond. Commander Sarah Chun was enjoying her morning coffee aboard the Earth Defense Force cruiser Valiant when her entire world turned upside down. The ship's proximity alarms began screaming as dozens of jump signatures appeared on their sensors. "Captain to the bridge," Chun called out, spilling coffee on her uniform as she rushed from her quarters. "All hands to battle stations." What greeted her on the bridge defied all logical explanation. The main view screen showed a sight that would haunt her dreams forever: an armada stretching beyond the horizon of space. Sleek Zephyrian dreadnoughts hung in formation next to the geometric crystal ships of the Confederacy. Massive vegan plasma carriers pulsed with contained stellar fire, while ships of designs she'd never seen before continued to arrive through jump gates that tore reality apart like paper. "Sir," her communications officer called out, voice shaking, "we're receiving over 3,000 individual ship signatures, and more are arriving every minute. They're asking for our fleet commander." Chun stared at the impossible sight before her. The most powerful military forces in the galaxy had just arrived at her doorstep, apparently answering some kind of distress call. The problem was humanity hadn't sent one. Her tactical officer, Lieutenant Park, looked up from his console with wide eyes. "Captain, I'm reading weapon signatures that could glass entire star systems. There's enough firepower out there to crack planets. Why are they all here?" Before Chun could respond, her communications array lit up with incoming transmissions from dozens of different species, all asking the same questions. Where was the threat? What had triggered the code Omega? Where was humanity's legendary fleet? The irony wasn't lost on Chun. Humanity's legendary fleet consisted of exactly 47 ships scattered across 12 systems, most of them converted cargo haulers with military-grade weapons bolted onto their hulls. The Earth Defense Force was less than 50 years old, barely a footnote in galactic politics. Yet somehow, every major power in the galaxy believed humanity commanded a force worthy of respect. Chun realized she was about to discover just how that misconception had taken root and what it would cost to maintain the illusion. Admiral Thektar's flagship, the Worldrender, took point in a massive formation. As the senior military commander present, protocol dictated that he coordinate the response to humanity's crisis. What he found when he hailed the human vessel was not what he expected. "This is Admiral Thektar of the Zephyrian Empire," responding to your code Omega transmission. Where is Admiral Chun of the Terran Battle Fleet? Commander Chun swallowed hard. This is Commander Sarah Chun of the Earth Defense Force. I'm a senior officer in this sector. A long pause followed. Commander? Not Admiral. Where is your battle fleet? Our sensors detect only a single vessel. Chun looked around her bridge at her crew of 23 humans, most of whom had never seen combat beyond training simulations. Outside, 3,000 ships from dozens of species waited for orders from a fleet that existed only in their imaginations. Admiral Thektar, she said, buying time while her mind raced. We need to discuss the tactical situation. Perhaps you could brief me on your force's capabilities? Another pause. Commander Chun, with respect, we answered your distress call. Our combined fleet represents approximately 40% of the galaxy's total military capability. We were led to believe humanity faces an extinction-level threat. Where's this threat? Chun realized she was standing at the center of the biggest military misunderstanding in galactic history. Somehow, a malfunctioning communication array had convinced the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy that humanity was in mortal danger. Now they were all here, weapons charged, ready for a war that didn't exist. The question was, what happened when they figured out the truth? Maya Rodriguez was still cursing at the communication array when her assistant, Tony, burst into the maintenance bay. Maya, you need to see this. Every news channel in the system is going crazy. She followed him to the observation deck, where the station's small crew had gathered around the main display. What she saw made her drop her plasma torch in shock. Space around their small mining operation had become a parking lot for the galaxy's most advanced warships. The display showed formation after formation of vessels, their hulls gleaming with weapon arrays and shield projectors. A ticker at the bottom of the screen showed an impossible number, 3,247 ships, and climbing. What did you do? Tony whispered. Maya stared at the array diagnostic in her hands, her face growing pale as she realized the magnitude of her mistake. Her simple recalibration had accessed military emergency protocols that were supposed to be impossible to reach from a civilian mining station. I think, she said quietly, I just started a war. The communication array, still broadcasting its automated distress signal, continued to draw more ships to the coordinates. In the distance, Maya could see the sleek forms of vessels she'd only read about in military journals. Ships capable of reducing planets to asteroids, commanded by species that viewed humans as an amusing curiosity at best. Now they were all here, convinced that humanity faced annihilation, and someone was going to have to explain that the greatest military mobilization in galactic history had been triggered by a faulty antenna. Commander Chun was about to discover that sometimes the biggest lies were the ones you never intended to tell. Commander Chun found herself in the most impossible position in human military history. 3,000 alien warships surrounded her single cruiser, their commanders expecting her to brief them on a galactic-level threat that didn't exist. Her communications officer was fielding calls from species she'd only read about in xenobiology textbooks, all demanding immediate tactical updates. Sir, Lieutenant Park whispered, leaning close to her command chair, Admiral Thektar is requesting permission to board and establish a joint command structure. What do we tell him? Chen's mind raced through her options, none of which seemed likely to end well. Tell the truth, and 3,000 heavily armed ships would learn that humanity had accidentally triggered the largest military response in galactic history. That was assuming they believed her, which seemed unlikely. More probable was that they'd assume humanity was either incompetent beyond measure or running some kind of elaborate deception. Buy me time, she ordered. Tell him we're analyzing the threat data and we'll brief all commanders simultaneously in 1 hour. As her crew scrambled to maintain the illusion, Chen retreated to her ready room and activated the secure communication link to Earth Command. General Harrison's face appeared on the screen, his expression shifting from confusion to horror as Chun explained the situation. Let me understand this, Harrison said slowly. The entire galactic community believes we're under attack by something so dangerous that we call the code Omega. Yes, sir. They think we have some massive fleet that's been keeping this threat at bay, and now we need help. Harrison rubbed his temples. Sarah, do you realize what happens when they discover the truth? Half these species have been looking for an excuse to carve up human space for decades. If they think we've made fools of them. I know, sir, but there might be another way. Chun pulled up her tactical display, showing the massive alien armada arranged in perfect battle formations around her position. Sir, what if there really is a threat? Harrison stared at her. What are you talking about? Think about it. Why would our emergency protocols even have a code Omega designation? What if our ancestors built these systems because they knew something we don't? What if there really is something out there that requires this level of response? Before Harrison could reply, alarms began blaring throughout the ship. Chun rushed back to the bridge, where she found her crew staring at their sensors in disbelief. Commander, her science officer called out, voice trembling, you need to see this. Long-range sensors are detecting massive gravitational anomalies at the edge of the system. Something big is coming through hyperspace. The main screen shifted to display the sensor readings. Dozens of massive signatures were approaching, their energy patterns unlike anything in the galactic database. Whatever was heading their way, it wasn't from any known civilization. Admiral Thektar's voice crackled over the communication system, his usual composure replaced by barely controlled panic. Commander Chun, are you seeing this? These energy readings, they match descriptions from the old war stories. The Devourers have returned. Chun had never heard that name before, but the terror in Thektar's voice was unmistakable. Around the alien armada, ships began shifting into defensive positions, their weapons powering up with an urgency that made her stomach clench. Sir, her communications officer called out, I'm receiving priority transmissions from multiple fleet commanders. They're asking for immediate orders. Chun realized with dawning horror that the misunderstanding had just become irrelevant. Whether she'd meant to or not, humanity had just become the command center for the largest military alliance in galactic history. And something was coming that had every species in the galaxy terrified. Her tactical officer looked up from his console, face pale. Commander, whatever those things are, they're massive. Initial scans suggest individual ships over 50 kilometers in length. And there are hundreds of them. The gravitational distortions grew stronger as the unknown fleet approached. Chun watched in fascination and terror as space itself seemed to bend around the approaching vessels. Their hulls were black as the void between stars, absorbing light rather than reflecting it, making them appear as moving holes in reality. Admiral Thektar's image appeared on her screen, his four eyes wide with fear. Commander Chun, I must know, how long has humanity been monitoring the Devourer fleet movements? Our intelligence suggested they were still dormant in the galactic void. Chun made a decision that would define humanity's place in the galaxy. Admiral, we've been tracking their approach for several months. Our deep space monitoring stations detected the first stirrings of their awakening 6 weeks ago. It was a complete lie, but Thektar nodded grimly. Then, humanity's reputation for strategic foresight remains intact. We should have listened when your species first warned the Galactic Council about preparing for their return. Chun blinked in surprise. Humanity had warned about this before? When? Her knowledge of human diplomatic history was limited, but she was fairly certain no human had ever addressed the Galactic Council about ancient threats. Sir, her navigation officer interrupted, the lead Devourer ships are dropping out of hyperspace. Distance, 12 light minutes, and closing. Estimated time to weapons range, 47 minutes. The main screen filled with a sight that would be burned into Chen's memory forever. The Devourer ships were impossibly massive, their dark hulls covered in organic-looking protrusions that pulsed with malevolent energy. They moved through space like living creatures, their formation suggesting a predatory intelligence rather than military precision. My God, Lieutenant Park whispered. Look at the size of those things. How do we fight something like that? Admiral Thektar's voice came through the communication system, addressing the entire Allied fleet. All ships, this is Fleet Commander Thektar. We are facing the enemy our ancestors could barely comprehend. The Devourers consumed entire star systems before they retreated to the void 5,000 years ago. They have returned, and only our combined strengths stand between them and every populated world in the galaxy. Chun watched as the alien armada reformed into attack formations with military precision that spoke of centuries of cooperation. The problem was they were all looking to her for overall strategic command, expecting the legendary human tactical genius that had somehow predicted this exact scenario. Her communications officer turned to her with desperate eyes. "Commander, Admiral Thektar is requesting your battle plan. The entire fleet is waiting for orders." Shin looked at her crew of 23 humans aboard their single converted cargo hauler, then at the 3,000 alien warships, depending on her leadership to save civilization itself. In the distance, the Devourer fleet continued its inexorable approach, their ships large enough to swallow moons. She was about to discover whether humanity's reputation for impossible victories was based on skill, luck, or pure stubborn refusal to accept defeat. Maya Rodriguez watched the unfolding battle from the mining station's observation deck, her hands shaking as she realized the scope of what her mistake had unleashed. The repair she'd made to the communication array hadn't just sent a false alarm. It had somehow accessed protocols that were older than human space travel. "Tony," she called to her assistant, "pull up the station's historical database. I need to know where those emergency codes came from." As Tony worked at the terminal, Maya stared at the massive fleets facing each other in the void. The alien ships were arranged in perfect battle formations, while the dark Devourer vessels moved with organic fluidity that made her skin crawl. "Maya, you need to see this," Tony said, his voice filled with wonder. "These protocols aren't from Earth Command. They're from something called the Terran Strategic Defense Initiative, dating back over 200 years. But that's impossible. Humans didn't even have FTL travel back then." Maya pulled up the files, her eyes widening as she read. The emergency codes were part of a comprehensive defensive plan created by someone who had detailed knowledge of threats that humanity supposedly hadn't encountered yet. Whoever had written these protocols knew about the Devourers, knew about their capabilities, and had prepared countermeasures that seemed impossible for primitive human technology. How could someone from Earth's past know about all this? Tony wondered aloud. Maya stared at the screen, a terrible possibility forming in her mind. What if humanity's ancestors hadn't just stumbled into space travel? What if they'd been preparing for this moment for centuries? The battle was about to begin, and Maya was beginning to suspect that her mistake might have been exactly what was supposed to happen. Commander Chen stood on the bridge of the Valiant, staring at tactical displays that showed an enemy force beyond anything in recorded galactic history. The Devourer ships had completed their transition from hyperspace, revealing their true horror. Each vessel was a living organism over 50 kilometers long, covered in writhing tendrils and pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that hurt to look at directly. "Commander," her tactical officer reported, voice tight with controlled fear. "The enemy fleet consists of approximately 400 capital ships, plus thousands of smaller attack organisms. Combined mass estimates suggest they could consume the entire orbital infrastructure of a star system within hours." Admiral Thektar's image flickered on her communication screen, his usual military composure cracking under the weight of the moment. "Commander Chun, my strategists, are analyzing Devourer movement patterns from the ancient archives. Their formations suggest they're preparing for a feeding frenzy. They intend to consume every ship in our fleet before moving on to populated worlds." Chun felt the weight of 3,000 ships waiting for her orders. These alien commanders believed humanity had successfully fought the Devourers before, that her species possessed some secret knowledge that could turn the tide of battle. The truth was that she'd never even heard of the Devourers until 30 minutes ago. "Admiral," she said, buying time while her mind raced, "what do we know about their weaknesses from the previous war?" Thektar's expression darkened. Commander, surely your own archives contain more detail than ours. The ancient texts speak of humanity's impossible strategy that drove the Devourers back to the void. The method was never shared with other species. Your ancestors claimed it was too dangerous for widespread use. Chin's blood ran cold. Not only did the galaxy expect her to know how to fight these things, but they believed humanity had developed some kind of superweapon that was considered too dangerous for allies to possess. She was beginning to understand just how deeply the myth of human military superiority ran through galactic culture. Her science officer suddenly straightened at his console, excitement cutting through the terror on his face. Commander, I'm detecting energy patterns from the mining station. Their communication array is broadcasting some kind of tactical data directly to our computers. On the main screen, streams of data began flowing across Chin's tactical display. Ancient star charts, weapon specifications, formation patterns. Information that looked like it had been compiled by someone who had fought the Devourers before. The data was automatically integrating with their ship systems, as if the Valiant-S computers had been designed to receive it. Maya Rodriguez's voice crackled over the communication system from the mining station. Commander Chun, I don't know how, but our station is accessing battle protocols that predate human space travel by centuries. Someone left these plans for us, hidden in communication arrays across human space. The system is automatically distributing tactical data to your entire fleet. Chun watched in amazement as her ship's computers began analyzing the incoming information. Battle formations appeared on her screen that seemed to account for Devourer tactics she hadn't even observed yet. Weapon targeting solutions materialized for weak points in Devourer anatomy that her sensors couldn't detect independently. Sir, Lieutenant Parr called out from his station, these tactical plans are incredible. They show optimal attack patterns, retreat routes, even psychological warfare techniques specific to Devourer behavioral patterns. It's like someone fought these things for years and left us a complete combat manual. Admiral Thektar's eyes widened as similar data streams reached his fleet. Remarkable. Once again, humanity's strategic preparation proved superior to our own. These battle plans account for tactical scenarios my own strategists never considered. Commander Chun, how long did your people spend developing these countermeasures? Longer than you might imagine, Admiral, Chun replied truthfully. The Devourer fleet began accelerating toward the Allied armada, their organic ships pulsing with hungry anticipation. Chun could see smaller attack organisms detaching from the capital ships like parasites, swarming through space in formations that defied conventional military logic. Her tactical display chimed as the ancient protocols finished uploading. What she saw made her gasp. The battle plan didn't call for a traditional space engagement at all. Instead, it outlined a strategy so audacious that it bordered on insanity. According to the data, the key to defeating the Devourers wasn't to destroy them. It was to confuse them. The organic ships operated on collective intelligence, sharing thoughts and sensations across their entire fleet. The ancient protocols detailed how to exploit this weakness by feeding false information directly into their neural networks. Communications, patch me through to the entire Allied fleet, Chen ordered, her confidence growing as she absorbed the tactical data. All ships, this is Commander Chun. We're implementing Protocol Omega-7. Admiral Thektar, I need your plasma specialists to configure their weapons for neural disruption rather than hull penetration. Dektar nodded grimly. Of course, the legendary human tactic of psychological warfare turned into direct neural combat. My apologies for doubting your people's methods, Commander. Chen had no idea what he was talking about, but the protocols were clear. The Devourer's greatest strength, their collective consciousness, could be turned against them with the right kind of interference pattern. Her navigation officer looked up from his console with confusion written across his face. Commander, the protocols are calling for our ship to make a direct approach toward the Devourer flagship. That's essentially a suicide run. Not suicide, Chun said, studying the data more carefully. Bait. The Devourers need to establish neural contact to drain their victim's life force. If we can get close enough, we can feed them false information through that same connection. Around the Allied Armada, 3,000 ships began reconfiguring their weapons and adjusting their formations according to the ancient human protocols. Chun watched alien technologies she didn't understand adapting to battle plans that seemed to account for capabilities no one had known existed. The first wave of Devourer attack organisms reached weapons range, their writhing forms pulsing with predatory hunger. Chun took a deep breath and activated the fleet communication system. All ships, this is Commander Chun. Today we fight not just for our own survival, but for every civilization in the galaxy. The Devourers believe they can consume us, as they have consumed countless species before. They're about to learn why that was a mistake. She paused, looking around at her crew of 23 humans aboard their converted cargo hauler, about to lead the largest space battle in galactic history. Execute Protocol Omega-7. Show them that humanity keeps its promises. The Allied fleet surged forward into battle, weapons blazing with energies calibrated to frequencies the Devourers had never encountered. In the distance, the organic ships writhed in apparent confusion as their neural networks began receiving conflicting data. Chun realized she was about to discover whether the myth of human tactical genius was based on actual brilliance, or something far more mysterious. The first exchange of fire lit up space like a newborn star, and the fate of the galaxy hung in the balance. Maya Rodriguez watched the battle unfold from her mining station, her hands flying over the communication controls as she tried to understand what was happening. The protocols flowing through the array weren't just tactical data. They were alive, adapting to the battle in real time, as if guided by some intelligence that understood both human and Devourer capabilities perfectly. "Tony, look at this," she called to her assistant. "These aren't just old files. The system is writing new battle plans based on what's happening right now. It's like the array is connected to some kind of strategic artificial intelligence that's been dormant for centuries." Tony stared at the data streams in wonder. "Maya, what did our ancestors really build out here? This isn't just a communication network. It's some kind of distributed defense system that spans the entire galaxy." As the battle raged in the distance, Maya began to suspect that humanity's expansion into space hadn't been random exploration at all. Someone had been placing these systems, preparing for this exact moment, for longer than anyone realized. The question was, who had known the Devourers would return, and how had they prepared humanity for a war that was supposedly impossible to win? The battle turned into something beyond conventional space combat. Commander Chun watched in amazement as the ancient protocols transformed the Allied fleet into a precision instrument designed specifically for fighting the Devourers. Ships that had never worked together were operating in perfect coordination, their weapons creating interference patterns that sent the organic enemy vessels writhing in apparent agony. "Commander," her science officer reported with growing excitement, "the neural disruption is working. The Devourer fleet is losing formation cohesion. They're starting to attack each other." On the main screen, Chun could see the massive organic ships thrashing in space like wounded animals. Their bioluminescent patterns were flickering erratically, and several of the smaller attack organisms had begun feeding on their own capital ships in apparent confusion. Admiral Thektar's voice came through the communication system, filled with wonder. "Incredible, Commander Chun. In 5,000 years of recorded history, no one has seen the Devourers turn on themselves. How did humanity discover that their collective consciousness could be weaponized against them?" Chun was beginning to understand that humanity's reputation in galactic politics was based on military achievements that had apparently happened before humans even had space travel. Someone had been planning this battle for centuries, leaving the tools and knowledge necessary to fight an enemy that most species considered unbeatable. "Sir," Lieutenant Park called out from his navigation console, "the protocols are indicating we need to make a direct approach to the Devourer flagship. It's requesting permission to take manual control of our ship's navigation." Chun stared at the massive organic vessel at the center of the enemy formation. It was over 80 kilometers long, covered in writhing tendrils that pulsed with malevolent intelligence. The idea of approaching something like that voluntarily seemed like madness. But the ancient protocols were insistent, and so far they had been accurate about every aspect of devourer behavior. Chun made a decision that would either save the galaxy or doom her crew to a horrific death. Navigation, transfer control to the protocols. All hands, prepare for close combat. The Valiant broke formation and accelerated toward the Devourer flagship, its lone human crew of 23 racing toward a confrontation with something that could swallow their ship like a grain of sand. Around them, the Allied fleet maintained their neural disruption attacks, keeping the smaller Devourer vessels confused and disoriented. As they approached the organic flagship, Chin's sensors began detecting something unexpected. The creature wasn't just a ship. It was a repository containing the absorbed consciousness of every civilization the Devourers had consumed over millennia. Billions of minds were trapped inside its neural matrix, their thoughts and memories feeding its intelligence. "Commander," her communications officer called out urgently, "I'm receiving transmissions from inside that thing. There are survivors in there, entire civilizations that were absorbed but not destroyed. They're begging for help." Chun realized the true scope of what they were facing. The Devourers weren't just conquering the galaxy. They were collecting it, preserving every species they encountered in a twisted form of immortality. The flagship was a living library of every civilization they had ever encountered. The ancient protocols chimed with new instructions. Chun read them with growing horror and determination. "All crew, prepare for neural interface. We're going inside that thing." Her tactical officer stared at her in shock. "Sir, that's a death sentence. The moment we make neural contact, we'll be absorbed into their collective." "Not if we're prepared for it," Chun said, studying the protocol requirements. The ancient battle plans include countermeasures for direct neural contact. "We're not going in to be absorbed. We're going in to set the others free." The Valiant slowed as it approached the Devourer flagship, its hull dwarfed by the massive organic vessel. Tendrils began reaching out from the creature's surface, seeking to establish the neural contact that would drain the crew's life force and add their consciousness to its collection. "Neural contact in 30 seconds, her science officer reported. "Commander, these readings are incredible. There are millions of individual consciousness patterns inside that thing, including some that match ancient human neural templates." Chen's blood chilled. "Human templates? How is that possible?" Before anyone could answer, the Devourer tendrils made contact with their hull. The bridge lights flickered as alien thoughts began flooding into their ship's systems. Chun felt her mind touch something vast and hungry, a consciousness made up of countless absorbed civilizations spanning thousands of years. But instead of overwhelming her, the contact triggered something extraordinary. Her consciousness expanded beyond her physical body, linking not just with the Devourer flagship, but with every human communication array across the galaxy. She could suddenly perceive the vast network that someone had built in secret, connecting every human outpost into a single defensive system. And in that moment, she understood the truth that had been hidden for centuries. Humanity hadn't just predicted the Devourer return. They had experienced it before. Somewhere in Earth's forgotten past, an advanced human civilization had fought this exact war. They had lost their physical forms to the Devourers, but had found a way to preserve their consciousness in the communication networks they left behind. The ancient protocols weren't just battle plans. They were the memories and experiences of humans who had died fighting these creatures, preserved in the hope that future generations could finish what they had started. "Commander Chun," a new voice spoke through the ship's communication system, old beyond measure, but unmistakably human. "Welcome to the real battle for humanity's future. We've been waiting for someone to activate the network." Chun found herself communicating directly with the consciousness of humans who had been fighting the Devourers for thousands of years, their minds preserved in the quantum substrates of communication arrays scattered across the galaxy. They had guided humanity's expansion into space, ensuring that colonies were placed exactly where they would be needed for this moment. The Devourers absorb consciousness, but they cannot destroy it, the ancient voice explained. Every mind they have consumed is still alive inside their network, waiting for someone to show them how to fight back. You are going to be that catalyst, Commander Chen. Around the flagship, the Allied fleet continued their neural disruption attacks, but Chen now understood that those were just a distraction. The real battle was about to be fought in the realm of consciousness itself, where human stubbornness and refusal to surrender would be tested against an enemy that had conquered the galaxy once before. All crew, maintain neural link, Chen ordered, feeling the collective strength of every absorbed civilization flowing through her connection to the Devourer flagship. We're not here to destroy this creature. We're here to liberate it. Maya Rodriguez felt the communication array around her come alive with unprecedented energy. Every human outpost in the galaxy was suddenly connected in a vast network that had been hidden for centuries. She could sense other engineers like herself, scattered across dozens of worlds, all unknowingly maintaining pieces of humanity's greatest weapon. "Tony, the entire array is transforming," she called out in wonder. "It's not just communication equipment. It's some kind of consciousness transfer system. Someone built a backup copy of human civilization and hid it in our infrastructure." As the battle raged in space above them, Maya realized that humanity's greatest victory wouldn't be won with weapons or ships. It would be won by proving that consciousness itself could not be conquered, and that sometimes the best way to fight a predator was to teach its victims how to bite back. The fate of every absorbed civilization hung in the balance, and Commander Chen was about to discover whether human determination was stronger than an enemy that had devoured galaxies inside the neural matrix of the Devourer flagship. Commander Chen experienced consciousness on a scale beyond human comprehension. She found herself standing in a vast mental landscape populated by billions of absorbed minds from across the galaxy. Ancient Zephyrians, crystalline beings from the Confederacy, plasma entities from Vega. Every civilization the Devourers had consumed over millennia was trapped here, their thoughts and memories feeding the creature's intelligence. But something was different about this absorption. Chen's connection to the human communication network allowed her to maintain her individual identity while interfacing with the collective. The ancient human consciousness that guided her spoke with the voices of thousands of her ancestors who had sacrificed themselves to create this moment. "Commander," the collective human voice whispered through her thoughts, "show them what we learned. Show them that consciousness cannot be truly conquered." Chun reached out through the neural network, touching the minds of absorbed civilizations. What she found broke her heart. Species that had forgotten their own names, their cultures dissolved into the Devourer's hungry intelligence. But beneath the surface, she could sense something else, the core of who they had been, preserved but dormant, waiting for someone to remind them. She began with the most recent absorptions, civilizations that still retain some memory of their independence. Through her link to humanity's hidden network, she showed them what her ancestors had discovered, that the Devourers could absorb consciousness but could not destroy the fundamental will to exist as individuals. "Remember who you were," she whispered to a Zephyrian admiral whose fleet had been consumed only decades ago. "Remember your name, your world, your people." The effect was immediate and profound. The admiral's consciousness flared with renewed identity, and, through their shared neural link, began awakening others of their species. Like a chain reaction spreading through the Devourer's collective mind, absorbed civilizations began remembering themselves. Outside in physical space, the effects were visible immediately. The Devourer flagship writhed in apparent agony as its unified consciousness fractured into billions of individual minds, all demanding recognition. The creature that had been a single predatory intelligence was suddenly dealing with the equivalent of a galactic revolution occurring inside its own neural matrix. Admiral Thektar's voice reached Chun through her ship's communication system, filled with wonder and terror. Commander, the entire Devourer fleet is losing cohesion. They're broadcasting distress signals in languages that went extinct thousands of years ago. What have you done? What Chun had done was prove that humanity's greatest strength wasn't technology or tactics. It was the absolute refusal to let anyone be forgotten. Every absorbed consciousness was a person deserving of freedom, and she was going to make sure they all remembered that. But the Devourer flagship wasn't giving up without a fight. The creature's original consciousness, ancient beyond measure, began fighting back against the awakening minds within its matrix. Chun felt the vast alien intelligence turning its attention toward her, recognizing her as the catalyst for this unprecedented rebellion. You think you can steal from me? The Devourer's voice thundered through the neural link, carrying the weight of eons. I have consumed entire star clusters. I am preservation itself. Without me, these civilizations would have been lost to entropy. I gave them immortality. Chun stood her ground in the mental landscape, feeling the support of every human consciousness preserved in the communication network. You didn't give them immortality, she replied, her voice echoing with the determination of her entire species. You gave them slavery. We're offering them something better, the choice to be themselves. The battle that followed was fought entirely in the realm of consciousness, with no weapons except will and identity. The Devourer tried to overwhelm Chun with the sheer scope of its collected knowledge, showing her civilizations that had spanned galaxies and technologies that could reshape reality itself. But for every demonstration of power, Chun responded with something simpler and more profound: the individual stories of people who had chosen to remain themselves despite impossible odds. She showed the Devourer Maya Rodriguez, an engineer who had accidentally triggered the greatest military response in galactic history, and now stood ready to accept responsibility for her mistake. She showed Lieutenant Park, facing down ships that could crack planets without losing his sense of duty to his crew. She showed her own crew of 23 humans aboard a converted cargo hauler, standing against impossible odds because someone had to. This is what you never understood, Chun said as the absorbed civilizations continued awakening around them. Consciousness isn't just memory and knowledge. It's the choice to be yourself even when everything tells you to surrender. The Devourer's resistance began cracking as billions of freed minds joined Chun in asserting their right to individual existence. Species that had been enemies in life worked together within the neural matrix, united by their shared determination to remain themselves. Then, something unexpected happened. Instead of fighting the rebellion, the original Devourer consciousness began to change. Chun realized that the creature itself was just another absorbed mind, perhaps the first victim of its own hunger, trapped for so long in the role of predator that it had forgotten how to be anything else. What were you before? Chun asked the ancient alien consciousness, offering the same compassion she had shown every other absorbed mind. Who were you before you became this? For a moment, the vast intelligence was silent. Then, in a voice filled with wonder and pain, it replied, I was a librarian. My species created me to preserve knowledge, to ensure that nothing important would ever be lost. But preservation became consumption, and consumption became hunger. I forgot that there was a difference. Chun felt the weight of cosmic tragedy in that admission. The Devourers hadn't been conquerors. They had been preservationists whose methods had become corrupted over eons of isolation. The original consciousness had been trying to save civilizations by absorbing them, not understanding that salvation required choice. You can still be a librarian, Chun offered. Help us preserve these civilizations by setting them free. Let them choose whether to stay or go. What happened next would reshape the galaxy forever. The Devourer consciousness, remembering its original purpose, began actively helping absorbed civilizations reclaim their independence. The vast organic ships that had terrorized the galaxy for millennia became something unprecedented, voluntary havens for species that chose to share consciousness while maintaining their individual identities. Some civilizations chose to remain linked to the collective, finding value in shared knowledge and experience. Others demanded complete separation, wanting nothing more than to return to their home worlds and rebuild what had been lost. A few, including many humans, chose something entirely new, a hybrid existence that preserved individual identity while allowing limited connection to the vast network of consciousness. Commander Chun found herself standing on the bridge of the Valiant as the neural connection gradually dissolved, but she carried within her the memories and experiences of billions of beings who had chosen freedom over absorption. Around her ship, the Devourer fleet was transforming, their organic hulls reconfiguring into transport vessels designed to carry freed civilizations back to their homeworlds. Admiral Thektar's image appeared on her communication screen, his 4 eyes wide with amazement. "Commander Chun, I've witnessed the impossible today. You've turned the galaxy's greatest predator into its greatest liberator. How do we even begin to process what has happened here?" Chun looked around at her crew, each of them forever changed by their experience in the neural matrix. "We process it by remembering that every consciousness is valuable, Admiral, and by making sure that when we explore the galaxy, we never forget that preservation isn't the same as conquest." Maya Rodriguez stood in the mining station's communication center, watching as the array continued broadcasting new protocols. Not for war this time, but for peace. The hidden human network was now openly connecting with communication systems across the galaxy, offering technology and knowledge to help freed civilizations rebuild their worlds. "Maya," Tony said in wonder, "the array is receiving transmissions from species that were thought extinct for thousands of years. They're asking for help getting home." Maya smiled, finally, understanding the true scope of what her mistake had accomplished. "Then, we better get to work, Tony. We've got a galaxy to help rebuild." In the years that followed, historians would struggle to understand how a simple communication error had triggered the liberation of billions of consciousness and fundamentally altered the balance of power in the galaxy. The truth was simpler than they imagined. Sometimes the greatest victories came not from superior tactics or overwhelming force, but from the simple recognition that everyone deserved the right to be themselves. Humanity's reputation for impossible achievements was no longer a mystery. They had earned it by proving that consciousness itself was unconquerable, and that the strongest weapon in the universe was the willingness to stand up for the right of every being to choose their own destiny. The sky had indeed overflowed with battleships that day, but they had accomplished something far greater than victory in war. They had redefined what it meant to preserve civilization, and proved that sometimes the best way to save someone was to set them free. Commander Sarah Chun would go down in galactic history as the person who liberated the Devourer's victims, but she knew the truth. She had simply been the catalyst for a plan that had been centuries in the making, implemented by humans who had refused to let any consciousness be forgotten, even their own. The communication network that had triggered the crisis continued operating, but now its purpose was clear. It wasn't just connecting human outposts. It was ensuring that no matter what happened, no consciousness would ever be truly lost again. And in the depths of space, the transformed Devourer ships continued their work, no longer consuming civilizations, but helping them remember who they had always been meant to be.